Hello, we are back here revisiting Debbie Kauble White. I'm going to get into a little bit more.
No, it's Debbie White Kauble.
Debbie White Kauble.
You want to start over?
No, that's fine.
Oh, okay.
I'm not into editing.
Okay.
But so I wanted to come back and talk about some things that I forgot to talk about the first time. So Debbie here is gracious enough to have me back. So let's get right into it. Now, during your time with your experience, you had maybe what was called, might be considered government involvement with a lot of visitations by black helicopters. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was shortly after the mark in the yard appeared that we started seeing black helicopters flying specifically over our house and circle around our house. Not just at my mom's house, but even after I moved out of there and got my own place, a year or so later, they were around. And sometimes it seemed like they were, their main goal was to just harass us. Because one time, this guy flew circles right above our house, like 40 times, just in a circle. And they were so low and loud that they rattled the windows, they upset my animals. And I even, when I lived on Washington Street and it was happening there, and I worked across the street at the Village Pantry, I would get phone call from my supervisor, wanting to know if I was all right, because they would see this helicopter flying around my house. And they didn't know whether it was a police helicopter or something going on, you know what I mean? So the helicopters, I have taken video of them over the years. I have video, I have photographs. They are black. They have no markings on them. They've been close enough that you could see the guy in them if you could see through the window.
It was tinted windows.
And the only marking I remember seeing on some of them were like a big round white mark in the front, like a dot, and that was it. Some of them looked like he even had little guns on them, but I don't know that it was guns. It might have been, cameras or something for all I know. But there was just something attached to the front of it. And like I said, they were loud, no markings. I called the airport. I called Grissom asking about this and was consistently told over and over again, what you're describing does not exist. There cannot be anything in the air without these FAA numbers on them, or even military.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I have pictures of this stuff to show you, No, well, that's just impossible. So.
And about how close was the closest the one ever got? There was a time where it was like, you said it was.
My kids were playing outside in the field at the side of our house, behind our house. We lived in the apple orchard. And they were outside with a bunch of their little friends. And they all came screaming into the house, terrified. And I knew the helicopters were somewhere I could hear them. And the kids came running in terrified that there was some man in a helicopter that wanted to take them for a ride. And I'm like, what?
Oh.
What are you talking about? And I got out there just in time to see this take off. The door was open. You could actually see people in it. And the kids insisted that this man in the helicopter was asking them if they wanted to go for a ride, and they were scared.
Wow.
And then my kids were, 9, 10, that age. So they got pretty hysterical. There's been many times when I've been out driving around, especially in the evening, and you can see it's like they get right on top of your car and then just follow you. And you see them, it's obvious. So it's almost I felt like it was some kind of intimidation or meant to scare me or something. I don't understand why, because I always said, I've always been open and free about whatever I remember, whatever I've seen, or whatever I know or don't know, and would be more than happy to talk to anybody about it. So
right.
You don't have to be all, 007 on me and be crazy. Just ask me.
Right. Like, then I wanted to ask you about the time that you were, I guess, had a little vacation at one of the cabins that you would go to.
Well, it was a guy that I recently had begun dating,
Mm-hmm.
and took me to. He had a cabin on a lake for a weekend. Ugh. It turned out to be a pretty weird weekend,
Mm-hmm.
which really ended before the weekend was even over. I remember going down there with him, and as we got out of the car after we pulled up in the driveway, thought I saw someone, around this cabin.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying something to him, and I remember looking over the top of the car at him, as we were getting out of the car, and the look on his face was like, and then, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's been a long time ago, and it's been a long time since I've even thought about this, so I have to think a minute to make sure I remember all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember something going around my mouth. I remember feeling like I wake up and I'm in a vehicle. I
Okay.
feel like I'm moving in a car,
Okay.
and but I can't see anything. And then I feel like I'm going down. Like, I'm being walked around and
Mm-hmm.
then going down and down and down. That feeling like you're in an elevator.
Right.
Somebody's holding on to me. And then it's like somebody took a blindfold off of me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm looking down a hallway, and I've got guys around me. I think they had like orange jumpsuits on, and there was doctors. I think they're doctors. They had on white lab coats and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a long hallway with part tile, white and shiny, and chrome like handles, and lots of windows with wire crossed to it like that,
Mm-hmm.
and doors. Then there were no handles on them. The only way to get in was to put a card in a slot.
Right.
And this was like in the late 80s, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, and when these doors opened, they like opened huge wide, so they would like open to whole rooms, but you could see other rooms within this giant room. You know what I mean? And at one point I remember this doctor coming up to me and saying, "You got a bug in your ear," or something like that.
Right.
And he pulled it out, and I saw it looked like a little bead.
Mm-hmm.
And then it like sprouted legs and it looked like a bug. And I was like, wow. And he laughed. I won't ever forget this. He laughed at me.
Mm.
And he said, "I don't even know why I'm bothering to talk to you. You're not going to remember any of this." And I remember saying to him, "I will never forget this."
Right.
And bam.
It was like you're back at the cabin.
Yeah. They did some other stuff to me. I remember having them, like, it's like they took hair and spit and nails and skin and scraping and
Mm-hmm.
blood,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff. But then I wake up in this guy's cabin,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm on the couch, and I remember looking over the top of the couch, and I see, and mind you, these people, all this that I just described to you, these were people.
Right.
It wasn't alien looking things. And I remember looking up over this couch, and I see this flashing light in his room, in his living room or something. And I'm not sure what it was, but I know he was like a volunteer fireman or something like that. So he had a police scanner in there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought maybe that's what it was. And then the next thing I know, he's up making coffee, saying, "Get your stuff packed up. You're going home."
So something got to
And
him.
he literally almost like didn't even stop at my. He could have so easily just kind of rolled slow past the driveway and shoved me out. He was so wanted to get rid of me.
Wow.
And it was like an hour or so drive because he was down south
Mm-hmm.
from where my parents' house were. And the funny thing was, this guy pursued me
Right.
for a long time, and I mean, he was relentless. And I
Right.
finally agreed to it. And then and then after this all happened, my girlfriend, whom I met him through because where he worked and where she worked, she said that he like virtually disappeared. He didn't work there anymore. And then she saw him later, and he had like grown a beard and changed the way the whole way he looked. And she said he did approach her and ask her if I was okay, how I was. And she said he acted really kind of weird. And then she said he disappeared, and she never saw him again after that, and I never saw him again. So I have no idea what that whole thing was about.
Right, like if he was genuinely...
If he was...
part of all that, or just...
happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I know when I got home that day, the morning that I got back to my mom and dad's house, I felt terrible. I felt sick. I literally felt sick. And, the more I was awake, the more I remembered this crazy dream, of this whole scenario that happened the night before. I'm like, what just happened? It's still foggy. And of course it's foggier now,
Well, but I mean,
later,
you remember clearly those certain things, though.
There are certain things about it that are distinct, I mean, they're like burned in my memory. They'll always be there.
Then I wanted to ask you about there was a time where you saw a large, like, boomerang-like UFO with your mother.
Yeah, I was, it was after June 30, 83, and I think it might have been somewhere around, like, April of 84 or something like that. We had at that point, I think, had contact with Budd by then. And, I don't know what I was all of a sudden I felt compelled to go out at like 11 o'clock at night to get fingernail polish remover, some crazy nonsense like that. And on the way home, I saw these lights headed towards my car, coming from the southeast side of Indy and headed to the east, or coming from the southwest side of Indy headed east. And, kind of like, here's my car and there's these, and I'm headed towards Mom's. I'm like, damn, that's bright, and then it looked like two headlights, so I thought it might be an airplane with its landing lights on from Indianapolis International, or Lear Cook as it was called, I think then. Anyway, when I'm watching it as I'm driving, and I'm feeling kind of creepy, and then all of a sudden it's like these headlights just turned into one big light. It was like 2 or 3 lights turned into one big one, and I'm like, oh shit, that's not normal. So I'm scurrying to hurry up and peel into the driveway, and was this when I went, because it seemed like it was daylight. No, it was in the evening.
Yeah.
It was in the evening. I'm trying to think.
Because you came back and then you got your mom
I ran in to get my mom and said, come out here and see this. And we were both out on the porch just as this thing started to come over the top of the house. And it was so big. My mom's house was surrounded by trees. So there was like a limited area of sky above, because there was like forest on one side, forest in the back. Well, not forest, but woods on one side, one on the back. And then there was a house next to us, but there was a few trees even between us. So we had this like little area above the house. This thing came gliding slowly and silently right over the house. You could see the black triangular shape, almost boomerang-ish.
Right.
Now, Mom and I made drawings. I actually saw like a black, like little small fuselage under it, square box-like.
Okay.
Which Mom didn't see, but it was black like the whole, boomerang shape, the triangle shape. But when it got right over the house, it kind of stopped a little bit. It didn't really stop, but it was just going so slow. Right. And it was so low that it was so big that it like filled up the whole sky over the house. It was twice the size of the house. And it was huge. And it was like these lights came on the bottom just as it got right over me and Mom on the porch. And it was almost, you could hear it. It was like a boom, and these lights came on. And I remember like strips of these bluish white light, so bright, the light, like the headlight went out and these bottom lights all came on. in strips along the edges, and there was a red light in the center up near the front. And I thought, oh shit. And my mom, she's standing there on the porch going, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? I was freaking out.
Right.
So I left her on the porch as it started gliding over the house because I wanted to see where it was going. So I ran out the back door and watched it. It went east, and then it got over probably about where the 465 and Brookville Road would be, and it stopped. And instead of banking like an airplane, it just went whoop, right on its axis, doop, and it started going back the same way it came, only it was headed a little bit more northwest.
Wow.
Real low. I bet it wasn't 500 feet off the ground.
Was there anything like, did you hear about it that like in the papers or anything?
No, that's the craziest thing of all. This thing was huge and low, and Indianapolis is not a small town, and it wasn't then. Somebody should have seen that besides just Mom and I.
Right.
For sure. And I mean, it was unbelievable. And the fact that nobody reported anything, I didn't hear anything about it on the TV or the radio or the newspaper or anything in the following days, absolutely blew my mind. And I'm like, what in the hell is this? It was that point that we were led to Dr. Hynek, J. Allen Hynek, at the Center for UFO Studies up in Chicago.
Right.
Budd contacted him about this, and he contacted us and kind of took it on as one of his cases, and we drew pictures. We spoke to him on the phone individually and together, and the last thing that he said to Mom in one of the last phone conversations that he had with my mother, and my mom told me, and I have no reason to not believe what she said. My mom doesn't lie. Right. He said to her that he had come to the conclusion after years of the things that he'd seen in his research, that not everyone was able to see some of this stuff. Right. And our case in particular that night would be a perfect example of it, because that thing was huge. Even though it was silent, there were plenty of lights all over it when it was over our house, and it had this giant headlight on it in the front, or this big front light, at least when it was coming at us.
Almost like you're tuned into whatever is going on.
Nobody, you cannot tell me that nobody else saw that, for God's sake. Still to this day, I've never heard of anybody else reporting or confirming that they saw something like that.
Well, it's almost similar to the Phoenix Lights. Some people say that, they're like, I saw a definite ship, a definite this kind of boomerang shape. And other people are like, I never saw anything, and I was out there. I should have seen it too. So it's like...
And Dr. Hynek said that he felt that might be the case, that not everyone is able to see it for whatever reasons.
And then I wanted to ask you, there was a time where you woke up, or you had an intruder in your house, and you gave him the nickname the Rubber Band Man.
That was so long ago, and it was when I lived in my apartment, and I don't even think I had a bed yet. I think I had maybe still had a cot, but it was a small 2-bedroom apartment, and I heard some rustling going on. I thought I was asleep. I was in bed, and I think I had this dream that this crazy thing came in my room, and it was like waving around and making all these horrible noises, and it's like told me that he was going to kill me, but first he wanted me to suffer or feel pain or something. And he looked like a monster, hideous, jaggedy teeth, and just, poking at me with some kind of stick. And I remember rolling up on the bed and getting like up in the corner, and then I hear, just about the time I think that, okay, I'm dead, I hear this beep, 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 beeping sound. And when I did, it had some kind of an effect on him, because he like kind of freaked out and took off. And I think I got out of bed and chased after him to the patio door.
Yeah.
And then I think I remember being somewhere up in a ship or something, like a big giant school bus.
Right.
And I could see out the windows, and there was another thing out there that looked like a a stick bug. Have you ever seen a stick bug?
Yeah, yeah.
The ship, I think, looked like a stick bug, and it was dark. I mean, and it wasn't like it was lit up or anything, but I could see it. I don't know where the other outside light was coming from. I mean, at first it looked like a tube, and then it like sprouted legs. And then somebody told me I passed a test, or that this had been a test.
Oh, wow. Like in your mind you heard that? That you had passed this test this time?
Yeah, and then I woke up.
And you woke up.
So, yeah. So I have some weird-ass dreams.
Well, yeah, you were saying how it was like you have like, they're almost border on like a virtual reality, basically.
I have 2 different kinds of dreams. I have the normal dreams that everybody has every night that I don't ever even remember having.
Right.
And then, occasionally some fluffy little dream that when I get up in the morning, I think, oh, I had this dream. It was nice. And then an hour later, I can't remember it.
Right.
Then I have these other ones. And they're like 3-dimensional, full-blown color, 3D, real intense, like I'm in it.
Right.
And when I wake up, I feel weird, like I've been somewhere. And exhausted.
Right.
And the longer I'm awake, the more of this dream that I remember. That memory comes back to me, and it stays with me forever. Those are the ones that I got up and wrote down whenever I woke up.
So did the rubber band man, he seemed more like
He seemed real.
Right, like you were awake, and it was this thing was there.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, and that's what I think. I don't know whether I was awake or not, because it felt like that's what happened. That was real.
And he was trying to poke you with some sort of triangular something. It was
some stick, and he was going to kill me with this thing. Is going to kill me, whatever it was. But I just kept focusing on his teeth, because they were jagged, and his mouth was big and weird looking. Yeah, but he was a little troll creature-ish thing.
And then I wanted to ask you. You've had like sensitivity to magnets.
Yeah.
Back then, you were very sensitive. Like you could tell if there was a strong magnet around.
Because it tingles. It made me tingle. I've had MRIs, and that's just a gigantic magnet.
Right.
And I hate them. They don't blow me up or kill me or anything, but I feel that.
You could feel it.
I feel it. It feels like my body feels real hot and tingly and vibrating. I do not like it at all. And they say, well, some people say they can feel that a little bit. And I'm like, I feel it a lot.
And then you had some experience with bending objects. Like I wrote down spoon bending because that's what it sounded like to me.
I actually did that one time when I was younger, because we watched Uri Geller on TV, and I'm like, I can do that, and we tried it, and it did move. But I didn't really realize it. This was years ago when I was a teenager, and as an anniversary gift, my older sister decided we were going to refinish my mom's kitchen cabinets. And so my job was to polish the brass handles that she had taken off, clean them and polish them.
Okay.
Before she'd put them back on after the cabinets were finished. So, and I didn't want to do it. It pissed me off, because I was a teenager. I had time for this mess. I had other things to do. But she, my older sister, she made me do it. So I was out there doing it, scrubbing and rubbing them. I looked down into the bucket of water that I was scrubbing them in, and some of them were twisted up a little bit, and I'm like, oh shit, they're not going to go back in the holes now. And my sister came out and looked at them and got all crazy on me like I did it on purpose, and I'm like, I swear I can't do this. I can't even bend them back.
Right.
And we were trying to bend it back, and we couldn't bend it back, so I have no idea what I did.
So it was like a brass?
It was solid brass.
Solid brass, wow.
I had no idea how that happened, how I did that. And I know I was mad. I had a lot of energy, and I've read later on, people have pointed out to me when you have a lot of kinetic energy,
It's almost like involuntary.
Why is it every
kinesis.
time you come to my house, my stupid neighbor decides to mow her grass? It's snowing out, for God's sake. Are you kidding me? Lord have mercy.
It's a sign. It's a sign. No. But has anything like that? Did that kind of fade away? Those type of things.
I have not done that in a long time. I haven't even tried. Maybe I should try.
And then I wanted to talk to you about. This isn't particularly about you, but when I read about your dad's, he had like a very miraculous healing that happened with his heart.
Yeah. Oh, before I get to that, I just want to make one more thing. My husband I'm married to now, when we lived out in the country, speaking of me doing things, I do it. I can't control it. I don't know when it happens. He pissed me off one day about something, and I was out in the garage, and I got the hedge clippers, the big, forged hedge clippers,
right?
And I was chomping away at stuff, and I was mad at him, and I just had them in my hand, and all of a sudden they stopped cutting. And I looked up, and they were curved like this. The blades curved.
Really?
And my husband saw them. He's like, "Good God, look what,
It's almost like Carrie.
He tells people, don't piss her off with metal objects because she bends them." But and I just remembered that when you asked me if I'd done it recently. That's probably been 10 years ago. But
still, I mean,
that's weird. I mean, and I'm just chopping away, and all of a sudden they just quit cutting because obviously they were
they
curved,
warped.
like,
They warped.
Instead of being like that, they were both like that. But anyway, my dad.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was diagnosed with
angina.
Well, he had angina, but they called it arteriosclerosis, hardening of the arteries. Back then.
And one side of his heart was smaller than the other, right?
And he had some. I think he had an episode at work at the plant when he worked there at Ford. Had to go to the emergency room, and had a heart doctor and everything. And I was young, and I don't recall, the details of it at this point now. And Dad's been gone for 10 or 11 years, but. After the thing happened on June 30th in '83,
he was shoveling a lot of topsoil. He got a bunch of topsoil, and then he was basically had some sort of an attack.
Like a heart. Well, yeah, I think he thought it was a heart attack. That he said he felt something in his chest pop.
Right.
I remember he said that.
Like something broke loose.
Yeah, and then when he went to the hospital or went to the doctor and got checked again, the heart was all the same size, and they didn't really have any sign of the arteriosclerosis. I mean, he was out there, and I remember him saying he felt something pop.
Right.
And he thought. And
he could feel like
he said it felt warm.
Yeah, because for years that side was cooler.
So he, so I don't know what happened. He was out there by the mark in the yard. So.
But do you think maybe he had any kind of contact with? I
don't know. My dad was
You kind of kept to himself about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he and my brother both really never spoke much about any of it. They were supportive, obviously. Dad, he found that the wires were melted in his antenna. The thing that came from the antenna to the house, that coax cable, was melted, and that antenna was right next to where the mark in the yard was. And what he saw in the wiring, it just can't happen. So, but it's weird because the dog that was out there that night with me, she had to be put down a couple months later. She fell apart literally, and I was sick for a whole year.
Yeah, it was they thought it might have been some sort of radiation poisoning, or maybe never really said.
Nobody said that. That was surmised by other people later,
right?
Because I didn't tell anybody at the emergency room or the eye doctors or anything else, any of the doctors that I was in contact with about that night,
right?
Because.
Who's gonna? Yeah, what are they
gonna? First time I didn't even remember it anyway, and then after that, who's gonna believe that? They don't. So I was a mess, but now I'm way better, except for my eyes.
So I wanted to go back and maybe talk about something that Budd Hopkins had said in interviews about how your case was kind of like a breakthrough in that he felt that he had found the reason why the Greys were coming here. And could you tell us about when you were 18 and you had a pregnancy that, can you just go talk a little bit about that?
Well, I never fully understood why, after all those years passed, that I would start thinking about that lost pregnancy again, and even why would I mention it to Bud? What would be the connection? But I felt compelled to, and so I did, and then I regretted it, and I felt crazy. But I was pregnant. I found out I was pregnant. I was dating the guy that I eventually married and had 2 other kids with. And we were engaged when I found out I was pregnant. I was just 17 at the time. And when you're only 17 and you think you're pregnant and you have my dad for a father, you don't tell him until you are 100% sure, because you know shit is about to hit the fan.
Right.
And you don't want to deal with that unless you have to. So I found out for sure that I was. Told my mom. I went to the doctor. I had a blood test and a physical exam, and the doctor confirmed it. I have the medical records for it. In fact, I got like 3 or 4 copies of the medical records, and they're spread out amongst several family members and friends, just in case. But I mean, that was done after the fact.
Right.
But then I babysat for my sister, who's 11 years older than me. And so I was at her house one night babysitting, and I even remember I was laying on the couch and I was watching like Bob Newhart on TV, and the front door was open. You could do that back then.
Right.
They were out and they'd be home soon. Kids were in bed. And I had my back to the TV at that point, my face in the couch. And I felt someone stroke my back, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go to sleep. I thought it was my niece or my sister, and them came in. I thought I heard someone in the house, so I really wasn't worried about it. I was already out. Then when I woke up the next day, I was in my niece's bed. It's not unusual. I didn't remember how I got there. And but my mind, I thought there's something wrong. And then I thought, there's something wrong with my baby. And I got up and went to the restroom and checked, and everything looked fine. But I still could not shake this weird feeling that something was wrong.
Right.
And eventually, a few days or so, my girlfriend, whom also her brother knows my older sister, so she was there in the neighborhood. She's like, I'm getting ready to go to Planned Parenthood and get my pills. So you want a pregnancy test? Quit your worrying. They'll tell you everything's fine. Come with me. It's free. You don't have to tell anybody. I'm like, okay. So I went with her, had a pregnancy test, sitting there waiting. We're in the waiting room, and the lady walks out and she says, well, your pregnancy test is negative. But if you don't have your period, like in another week or so, we suggest that you contact your family doctor. And all I heard was the word negative. And I went, what?
So you eventually went to your family doctor? Yeah,
my mom. I went to my mother. I didn't tell her I had had another pregnancy test.
Right. Okay.
I didn't tell her that part. I just said, look, something's wrong. I don't feel good. I'm spotting. I need to see the doctor. So she's like, okay. So she took me back to the doctor. The doctor gave me another physical exam. They gave me another pregnancy test. And then their test was negative. My physical exam was normal. He took me and my mom into his room, his little office, and he said, look, this happens. We see this from time to time. We don't really know why, but my suggestion to you is that you just forget about it. That you're young, you'll have more kids. And my mom's like, well, does she need a D&C or, something to clean it out?
Right.
And, he's like, no. Everything is perfectly normal. And I looked at him and I said, I will never forget this. Just like I said to that guy, that doctor, I'll never forget it. I got a strong mind. I'm like, no, I can't ever forget this. But we never talked about it again.
So in the book, I remember reading about where this, and I'm foggy on where this memory came, but there was a point where you had said that you remember seeing a gray holding a baby, like in the palm of its hand or something like that.
There's a memory. I have a memory, or I call it a dream. I had a dream where someone took something out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Felt like I was in a doctor's office or doctor's surgical suite or something, but just plain. And I could feel,
Right.
you know, somebody going up through my privates and pulling something out of me. And I'm thinking in my head, screaming, "Oh my God, that's my baby," you know. And, you know, that was a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And that happened after all this, or?
I remembered it after all.
Right.
I mean, I had that. It's like I remembered a nightmare.
Right.
You know what I mean? But and then I can't remember how long it was after that. That I'm back with them same things and this nightmare again, the same beings.
It must have been like 10 years later or so?
It wasn't that long, I don't think. And I'm in this room. I don't ever remember how I get to this place.
Right.
It's like I block out, or, you know, that part of my dream is not important to me or something. I don't know. I just kind of like wake up here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wake up at home. I don't ever remember how I got there or how I got home. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the one that I'm familiar with is here with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then here comes another one, and they have this little girl, little, like maybe the size of a 2 or 3 year old, maybe, hiding behind them. But she don't look like them. She looks like me, like a human.
Like human.
Mostly. A little odd, but probably could pass for human. And she's scared of me. She's hiding behind them like she don't want to look at me.
Right.
And all of a sudden I felt very maternal, and I thought, oh, you know, it broke my heart that she was afraid of me, and I felt like I was her mother. You know, I just wanted her to take home with me. And I had a conversation with this. I got angry, and I had a conversation with this gray, and it wasn't a conversation in the, you know, like talking, but it was this exchange of feelings and visualize, you know what I mean? This exchange, and she, whatever, could not understand why I was angry.
Right.
And
you wanted to take her
home, and he told me I couldn't because she would not survive with me.
Right. You wouldn't be able to feed her and all this other stuff. And then the gray had said, you know, you're going to have to go because you're going to get sick if you stay too much longer. So I remember that, like, there's something about being in that environment.
I could never be there for long.
Or with them, that they sometimes unintentionally exude things that are not good for us.
Or I don't know. Or else maybe some mental thing with me if I, you know, maybe it's all psychologically happening and I'll not be able to come back. But I don't know. But yeah, that's been, and you know what? Other people have reported that as well. But anyway, so I had all this weird stuff. This mark in the yard happens. One of the first things I begin to think about again, like I said, once the mark appeared in the yard after June 30, 83, it was like somebody pulled the finger out of the dam, and just all kinds of stuff came flooding back. Within all that flood was that pregnancy.
Oh, okay.
And I did not understand why, because I had no idea why this would be connected to that. Because at that point, I hadn't had the nightmare yet. I didn't start having the nightmares about the guys and the kids and stuff until after the mark in the yard. Right. Even though that happened prior to. Right,
like you said before, it was like this trauma that you did remember, it kind of like shook everything loose, and then you were remembering all these things.
Right, and then I started remembering the nightmares and you know, the baby itself coming back, that I had been pregnant, and I have no idea why. And I felt like an idiot and crazy. Bud and I had gone to somebody's house while he was in Indiana. He was looking at another case nearby, I think in Greenfield. So I went out there with him, and then on the way home, I remember as we rolled up in the driveway and we're kind of sitting there, and he gets the sense that I've got something I want to tell him. And so we're just kind of sitting there, and I finally blurted out to him, you know, I had a pregnancy one time that disappeared. And he said, I remember looking at his face, and he's like, okay. Because he's thinking, where is this going?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
He didn't want to discourage me from talking.
Right.
And I'm feeling like insane. My heart's pounding in my throat.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I started blurting it out and telling him. And I said, and I started crying. I'm like, I don't have any idea why I'm telling you this. I have no idea why I think there's a connection. I'm just,
right.
There it is.
But then after that, it's like more cases came forward about all this stuff.
I think Budd told me that, he started getting real shortly after I blurted that out to him and totally threw him for a loop.
It was like it was time.
He got tons of mail from women that were reporting like
similar things,
the same things,
right?
And some of them were outrageous. Some of these, I read a letter from a lady one time, and I know he worked on her. She was like 4 or 5 months pregnant and had ultrasound and everything, and then no baby,
and then nothing,
and how does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
I was just a little, I maybe was like
a month or a couple months.
Maybe I think I was about 2.5 or 3 months pregnant, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like, back then you didn't find out you were pregnant until because the tests like that you could get weren't like they are today, real accurate. You had to wait.
Mm-hmm.
So
my big question is, and that it's everybody's big question that reads about this stuff and looks into this stuff about the hybrids. Is why? I mean, why is it? Some people think the Greys need to revitalize themselves, so they're taking some genetics from us to do this. There's some people that think that this could be the next step in evolution, like it's an upgrade for us eventually. I don't know what your feelings or thoughts, or do you have anything about?
Well, I don't know. There's a bunch of different theories, and they all seem like one's just as good as another one.
Right.
I don't know. I have no idea because I never asked, and no one bothered to ever tell me.
Right.
And so, because all I kept thinking about was not dying.
Right. Right.
And so I don't know. I can say one thing I feel is that it has something to do with the future, and I feel like. I don't know why. I feel like at least some of this contact might have been from people that are my great grandchildren. You know what I'm saying? Somehow there was some familiarity with me and with them, with this one in particular.
The Grey?
Yeah.
So like they're from the far future of some sort?
Maybe. I think that's as good a theory as any. Nobody really knows.
Right.
Who knows? I don't know. I do know that I don't think that there are a bunch of hybrids that are walking around out here on the planet getting ready to take over the planet. I don't believe that.
No.
No, I don't. I'm sorry if I, make people sad by that, but I don't think that's correct.
But have you had any experience with the telepathy part of it, like as far as yourself with
definitely.
Other people?
Yes. It's like when this all started to come about and happen and accelerate, it's like it flipped a switch on in me, and I still I don't know why, I can look at people and I know them.
It's like when you said to me before, like you knew that I wasn't like some creep or something. I was like, I didn't have bad intentions.
No, I feel that. I understand. I when I communicate, it's not just with my voice. And people don't either. You don't realize what you put out there.
Right.
And when you are with people, and I feel it and I sense it, and it gets stronger. The older I get, the better it is. The more I trust it, the sharper it becomes. And yeah. So
is this something that you use that it happens almost daily with people that you can tell with some people? Like,
yep, 100%. And you know what? I've been in conversations with friends, and then I'll respond to something that I thought they said, and they'll be like, "Oh, I didn't say that." I said, "Well, you were thinking it then, weren't you?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, I was, but how did you hear me?" I think I hear you say it, but you really didn't, but somehow I heard it.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I do that all the time. It can be annoying.
Yeah, because it's like not everybody wants to know.
And I can't control it. and sometimes it's really on. Like if I don't know if I'm vibing or what is going on with me, but I'm like really on. And then other times I'm kind of dull. I think it depends on how much sleep I've had, what I've had to eat, what I've been doing, if I'm tired, if I'm sick. You know what I mean?
Because that's, I think, I know I'm putting my own thoughts into this, but when I hear about that and then about the stuff that I've read, it's like maybe this is an upgrade for us somehow, like the telepathic thing, because if we're all telepathic in some way, it's like we can't get away with the same stuff we used to.
And
like,
it's so much easier to communicate. I've always said I would wish I could just get inside of people and make them know what I know,
right?
Because it would eliminate so much question and it would make things so much easier. But it's not how that works right now.
Yeah. Well, I really want to thank you for letting me come back and talk more about all this stuff, because again, I just feel like people should really know more about this stuff. The more it's talked about, I think the better it gets.
Well, the thing about it is, okay, there's plenty of UFO reports out there, and even people that claim contact. But there's so much more to it that is not reported.
Right.
And then when people don't see it out there, and then they're more hesitant to share that part of it with them, with everybody too.
Right.
It's bigger than just seeing lights in the sky or even,
right.
contact. It's bigger than that.
Right. It's a shame that people feel that they have to keep all this to themselves, when it should be more of a benefit to other people to know about this stuff.
Yeah.
Letting me come back and talk. And that's it.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right.